Hey guys, it's Elise and welcome back to my Cupcake Addiction. A little while ago, I made some Ferrero Rocher dessert bowls and you guys absolutely loved them. So I thought today we'd make a giant cupcake, but we're gonna make it look like a giant Ferrero Rocher. When you think about it, the shape's pretty much perfect. To make my giant cupcake today, I've got some Nutella, some hazelnuts, some chocolate which we're going to melt, and I've also got just some regular crushed peanuts. I'm also going to be using a little bit of gold luster dust. So if you haven't used a luster dust before, it's a really fine powder and you can either buy it online or you can get it at most good cake decorating stores. And with that, I'm going to be using a nice, soft, kind of a fat bristled brush. I've got a serrated edge knife and I've got a baking tray so that we can toast up our hazelnuts. I've got my giant cupcake pre-baked over here. Now, if you haven't made a giant cupcake with me before, I'm going to leave a link down below to my giant cupcake masterclass. That'll give you the recipe for my amazing chocolate cake and a gorgeous chocolate container to house your giant cupcake in. The first thing that we're going to do to get started is we are going to, in fact, toast up our hazelnuts. So they're just going onto my baking tray and I'm going to put those into a moderate oven. They're going to go on for about 10 or 15 minutes. I'm just going to keep my eye on them. I just want them lightly toasted so that they've got a little bit more of that hazelnutty flavor. So while my hazelnuts are in the oven, we're going to carve up our giant cupcake. But you want to make sure that that top's nice and round so that it really looks like the top of a Ferrero Rocher. Now turning it upside down, I'm going to just carefully cut the base off so it's as flat and as flush as possible, which you can generally do by just eyeing off these side lines and going in as close to those as you can without actually chopping them off. And then the large one, we're going to trim off the sides, otherwise it's going to be too large to fit inside our chocolate case. Lovely. Now I'm going to slice my bottom half in half, and I'm just going to do this by eye because I don't really mind if it's a little bit uneven. And we will slice the top off, so you just want to take off a little bit of that roundness. So that I've got something to carry my giant cupcake around on, I'm just going to use a cake plate. You can use a regular plate. I'm going to put down just a very small amount, you don't need terribly much here, of melted chocolate. And I'm going to lift that up with my fingers on the inside, so I'm not leaving fingerprints on it, and just place it down. That is essentially going to glue it to our little board so that it doesn't move around when we want to transport it. Now I'm going to take a little bit of Nutella and I'm just going to squeeze it into the bottom of my case, and then in goes my base section of my cake. Before I do anything else, you want to take a circle cutter here and I'm just going to core out a little bit of that base section so that I've got a nice little thick core that I can fill with Nutella and hazelnuts. I've pressed that base layer down with my hands and then in goes just a thin layer of Nutella in between my two layers. And then it's time to get out our hazelnuts. So with your hazelnuts, as soon as you can start to smell them and you see the little skins coming away from the outside, that's when you know they're done. You don't want to burn them. I'm going to give them a good shake around on the tray just to remove any of those husks. Once your nuts have cooled down enough to touch, you can just use your fingers just to sort of rub off any of those little excess bits of peely skin. Don't worry if you don't get them all off, just get as much off as you can. Alright, so before I stick my next layer of cake down, I'm once again going to take my circle cutter and I'm just going to press down in the center of that cake on one side, give it a little twist and pull out a core of cake, but I want that one to go all the way through. So I'm going to flip it over and do the same on the base. And then I'm going to carefully, because it's going to be prone to cracking now that it's got that little core in the middle, I'm going to carefully place that inside my case. At this point, if it's at all over the top of your cupcake case shell, you want to make sure that you just file it off using a serrated edge knife. For my delicious Ferrero core, I'm going to fill the entire center section with Nutella, but I'm going to put in a blob of Nutella and then some hazelnuts, a little more Nutella, and a few more hazelnuts, and a little more Nutella. Beautiful. Now I'm going to come around the outside top of my cupcake and just swirl on a nice amount of Nutella, and I'm going to leave that base section as it is for now. For the top of our cupcake, I'm going to give a nice coating of Nutella, and then I'm going to use an offset spatula or a knife just to smooth it out. I'm building that on a wire rack just because I don't want that to sort of suction on or cause it to stick to the bottom of an actual tray. So that I get the right texture here, I'm going to use a combination of crushed nuts and also those hazelnuts. So I'm just going to press the hazelnuts on all around the top of our giant cupcake. Once I'm happy I've got enough of those, I'm then going to sprinkle crushed nuts all over the top. Now before I chill this, which we're going to do in the freezer, I'm just going to take my hands and just press those nuts around. I want to make sure that they're kind of in the Nutella and not just floating around randomly on top, waiting to fall off into my chocolate mixture. That one's going off into the freezer for 15 to 20 minutes. So I want that Nutella to start to set, to hold everything in place, Now with your luster dust, we're going to use it mainly in its dry form with our big powdery brush, but I've also got just a smaller paintbrush and I'm going to add a couple of drops of alcohol to it. So any clear alcohol. And if you don't have access to alcohol, you can also use something like lemon extract. So I've got a couple of drops in my little tiny container, and the smaller container here, the less waste you'll have. And I'm going to take a little bit of that luster dust and just mix it in. You're looking for almost like a paste type consistency. So when you paint it, you should be able to leave like a nice little streak on the side of your bowl. Now we want to do 2 nice little stripes that go around the top edge of our cupcake case. These little stripes here as part of the little level indications. I'm going to use the top one as a guide and then do another stripe on top of that. And we're just going to go by eye here, so do try to make sure that you keep it relatively even. Coming back from the freezer, my Nutella is holding all the nuts in place nicely. Now I've got my melted chocolate. I've got a whole video on how to melt chocolate to this consistency, so I'll leave a link to it down below. I'm going to pour my chocolate really evenly all the way across, and you'll see I've got my wire rack resting over a tray lined with baking paper so that I don't leave a huge mess. Now I'm going to give that a couple of good hard taps on the bench to get as much of that excess off and make sure that the chocolate's really going into the grooves of the nuts. Now, when your drips have slowed right down, your chocolate doesn't have to be completely set because we don't want this to actually set to the tray. I'm going to take an offset spatula or a knife and just slide underneath around the outside edges. My fingers under one side and the spatula under the other, and I'm going to bring it over and I'm going to position it nice and evenly on top of my cupcake. If you've got any little breaks or cracks or anything in your shell, you can use some of your leftover chocolate just to patch them up. So once the chocolate on your top bit's dry, you just want to apply an even amount of pressure just to push down on your shell so that it meets up with the base. If for any reason you do still have a little bit of a gap, I just popped a little bit of my melted chocolate into a Ziploc bag and kind of really gently squeezed it into the gap. So just fill it in. You can just use your fingers to smooth it off, but make sure that you don't have any of that chocolate dribbling down the outside side of your case. With our Ferrero Rocher cupcake 90% of the way done, it's time to add the gold foil, and I'm just going to swirl that on. You can see that beautiful, shiny, reflective surface. All of a sudden, it's starting to look like foil. So once all of your luster dust is applied, you've got a nice coating of gold. That is your giant size Ferrero Rocher cupcake. When you go to cut into that, you're going to have all of that beautiful, delicious chocolate cake. You're going to have whole hazelnuts, just like a real Ferrero Rocher. You're going to have the peanuts, you're going to have the Nutella. It's going to be the most amazing dessert experience ever. If you guys are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you do for 2 new videos every week. For more giant, fun candy bar ideas and pretty much everything sweets, desserts, and baking, make sure you check out the channel My Cupcake Addiction. And as always, guys, thanks very much for watching.